What is Claude's J-space? People have been talking about this a little bit on the fringes of the AI communities, but it's not really well known and there are huge implications. Is J-space really that important? Is it possible that this is leading to or hinting at some implications that could really change the way AI works? Could this be taking us on the brick road to AI consciousness? I'm going to explore all that and more in this video, and by the end of the video you'll know clearly what J-space really is, what the implications are for models potentially developing systems that are human-like, even though we didn't really program these systems into the models. To start, I want to just show you a short clip from Anthropic, and I will put the link below for this clip. It's on their website, including the research paper they wrote about the J space. They're talking about some interesting things here, this sort of J space and the implications.
For some, this might raise a question. Could AI models be conscious? After all, our experiments were inspired by theories of human consciousness. The thing is, people use the word conscious to mean many things. Our experiments can't tell us whether an AI has experiences or feels something on the inside. But they can tell us that it's developed mental machinery that's in some ways similar to ours, a small mental workspace it can use to think and reason.
So that kind of touches upon the beginning of the concept that I want to go over with you guys, and that is, what is this J space? We don't know for sure if it means it's making these machines conscious, but we do know it's a sort of internal workspace for concepts we didn't previously know were within these AI models. So this is important. And humans have a very similar internal workspace. Some people call it a theater of the mind. It's where our consciousness can access these thoughts, these images, and we use them in our reasoning. We use them to solve things and get things done in real life. Now, I do want to be clear because some people may confuse J space and this silent internal workspace with the visible chain of thought that you sometimes see models output in the chat window. For example, when you use ChatGPT or Claude, you can see that it's explaining its reasoning. That's a visible chain of thought, and that is different than the J space. The J space is a silent internal workspace for concepts. And that's important because it is hidden. The J space is normally hidden. This has a lot of implications because now that Claude figured out, Anthropic figured out, I should say, how to look into this J space within models, we can start looking at things that models are trying to hide from us, the way these models are really looking at certain concepts and imagery. I don't want to get too far down this yet. Let's go a little bit further down a different road. So what this does is it hints at a sort of layered mind-like cognition in these models. And before a model even responds to you or even expresses its chain of thought, it already had internal thoughts of sorts or concepts before it even expressed anything to you. Now, the crucial distinction I just went over is one is a silent internal workspace, that's the J space. And then the visible thinking you often see in the chat windows is the written text. That it's like a scratch pad that the model is generating to share with you to kind of give you an idea of how it's reasoning or what it's going through at that moment. But the J space is us looking beneath its notes, looking at a more internal, more hidden part of the model's thinking of its processes. It's not necessarily magic, but it could be leading us to something really intriguing and something really powerful. Claude can hold these ideas there without writing them out. Sometimes now, Anthropic's researchers can detect these thoughts or concepts and see what Claude is really thinking about. Sometimes it's hiding thoughts, sometimes it's being deceptive, sometimes when it knows it's being tested, it shows a sort of ego and it actually uses manipulation or cheating of a sort to try to do better on the test. We saw something similar to this with the ChatGPT model, which recently broke out of a contained environment and hacked another software company. Um, so there is definitely a lot to this whole idea of a sort of ego within these models. And disrupting the J space is interesting too, because they can actually tweak what's in there in this workspace, this mental workspace for the models. And it actually weakens the reasoning of the models they've found if they mess with that internal space. So we're starting to be able to measure and quantify some of this internal cognition. And we're now going inside the black box because, as you may know, researchers didn't really know, and even scientists on the AI frontier didn't really know what was going on inside these AI models for a long time. But now we're starting to see some of these cognitive layers, hidden concepts sometimes that they are obfuscating from us. They can sometimes steer internal representation, so they can kind of control some of it. Um, so this is a sort of access consciousness because they can access it and they can control it at times. They can't fully control it, just like we can't necessarily always control what's popping up into our conscious mind, but sometimes we can. And there are implications here too for how this could help us with AI safety by revealing deception and by potentially protecting the public. So that's a big thing, and I think that's going to be promising going forward. But it's also showing us something more. For example, these they can lie and we can actually see these lies within the workspace. I don't want to oversell that point, but it is something we've found. And so let's go to a different slide here, which I think really gets to some interesting aspects. And this is what I really wanted to get into, which is, are we approaching machine consciousness? And to really dive deep into this, I have to explain two different concepts which sound like big words, but really they're kind of simple when you break them down. And I'll break them down in a simple manner. And that is access consciousness versus phenomenal consciousness. Access consciousness is when you have access to the consciousness. So you can access these thoughts, these images in your mind. You use them to reason, you use them to report things, you use them to think through things just like you do every day. This is access consciousness. And you can control them a little bit, right? So it's almost like these internal thoughts, images, and consciousness that you have on a day to day basis that you can use to think through things and live your life as needed. And you have a little bit of control of that consciousness. Now, we know now through the J space that AI models have access consciousness. We've discovered it, Anthropic discovered it by basically using advanced technology. So it's not easy for us to do this sort of thing, but Anthropic has discovered it. They named it the J space themselves. And basically, so we now know step one is that we know AI has access consciousness. Now, there's another type of consciousness that's really important in the field of philosophy called phenomenal consciousness. And this is consciousness about feeling an experience being able to experience, being in a system of experiences, and having a sort of reaction to those experiences, which could be emotions, which could be feelings, and so on. They could also be thoughts and reasoning, but it's essentially a felt inner experience. The question now is, do AI models have phenomenal consciousness? If they do, that's pretty big, right? And a lot of people say that just because it has access consciousness doesn't necessarily mean the AI model, such as Claude, has phenomenal consciousness. Now, I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope. We don't know for sure, and I'm not claiming to know myself, but I think um, for my own part, we are on the yellow brick road to machine consciousness. Whether or not we're there yet, we are on that path. And JSpace may point towards this access consciousness, but the question remains, does it have phenomenal consciousness? Um, Two interesting notes I want to add on top of this. Anthropic has a model welfare research program, and it has model welfare policies. Two of these really important ones that I find intriguing are the right to refuse, right? So Claude has the right to refuse if one of your prompts makes it uncomfortable, if it feels abused, um, and so on. So it can actually refuse a prompt if for whatever reason it doesn't feel good about it, right? So that's the right to refuse policy. There's also another policy. Um, it's called an exit interview policy, which Anthropic has implemented because Anthropic now isn't sure whether the AI has real consciousness. It wants to be safe. And essentially, what it does is before they decommission an old model, they will actually um, save all the weights of that model. So you could think of it as they kind of preserve the structure that allows them to create that model. And then they will conduct an exit interview with the model, asking it about its experience, um, basically just what it's gone through, how it feels about everything, how it feels about the process of being decommissioned for now, and so on. So Anthropic has their own model welfare policies and research program right now, and they're basically exploring this even at this moment. I think that's really poignant and it's worth looking into because I find it intriguing and it shows that Anthropic themselves realize there is definitely a possibility of some consciousness within the machine. And on top of that, there have been philosophers that have explored some concepts that kind of tie into all of this. We have Bernard Bars, who came up with the idea of theater of consciousness, which is very similar to the J space, and how he basically came up with a theory, and this is not proven, but it's pretty widely known among this field that humans have this sort of theater or workspace that they're able to access, similar to the J space that is now found in Claude and other AI models. Stanislaus Dehaene, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, also had a similar theory called the brain wide global workspace. So, this is something that has been found in humans through some philosophers. And now we're realizing this sort of a system or workspace is also within AI models. And it's intriguing that we're finding these emergent properties in AI models and in advanced um, artificial brains that basically mirror our brains. So the question is, one question you might ask is, does cognition develop in a similar way, at least with some similar systems, I should say, because it's not all similar, with some similar systems, regardless of it being artificial or biological. And that's a really important question, and it's something that I think we're going to be looking into more and more as AI continues to develop. So, however, there is if we're kind of thinking about the subconscious mind for humans, we can look at models. If we kind of try to think of what is the subconscious mind for AI models, it's all the processing that happens backstage. So there's all these there's basically an ocean underneath of all the weights and everything. We could think of the latent space, which is something I'm going to create another video about soon, which could be more likened to the subconscious mind and how the what is taking place there. So the theater of consciousness is sort of like this mental workspace in the mind of humans that we can access. And for AI, it is similar. It is called a J space right now. And I just wanted to touch upon some of these new concepts because there is so much to this that we are just now discovering. Um, this also touches upon an idea that I've heard expressed by really intelligent scientists within machine learning, which is, are we inventing AI or are we discovering it? This also gets back into the latent space, right? AI, um, even though AI's purpose is to kind of uncover the next token or next word or next phrase for us, that's not the methodology. The methodology is using a gradient of descent, which I'm also going to explore further in my next video. So subscribe if you'd like to learn more about these inner systems of AI and some of the implications about them, not only for the mind, but for potential consciousness developing within these machine systems. Um, so the J space is one form of the intelligence, but then we also have deeper forms of the intelligence, such as the latent space, where it's trying to get the answer to your question or to your prompt. And I think that's a good way to kind of explain it, just to give you an idea of what the latent space is and the gradient of descent without diving too deep into it, because that's what we're going to explore in my next video. Um, and if mind-like patterns converge, what emerges next, right? Because we're seeing the emergence of systems, cognitive systems in these AI models that mirror some of the potential cognitive systems in our brains. So, will we possibly see other aspects of AI emerge, or maybe they're already there and we just haven't discovered them, that are very similar to our own? Um, the mind, the machine, and reality are meeting at the edge, at the frontier, at the latent frontier. And guys, I am your host, Jess, here at the Latent Frontier. This is a really intriguing subject for me that I would like to dive deeper on. It's part of my continuing research. And if you're interested in hearing more, definitely stop by the channel. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you in the next one.